You're listening to the Access Success Podcast, produced by AccessU, a division of Access Advertising and Public Relations. Hey, let's do something big. I'm your host, Rachel Schneider. Welcome to the Access Success Podcast, where we highlight important topics focused on education in every form it takes. Today, we're talking about ways to boost enrollment, specifically for Hispanic students. An article published by the Chronicle of Higher Education highlights some staggering statistics surrounding the decline in Hispanic Americans pursuing their degree and the implications that their absence has in higher education. For 2 decades, Hispanic students have been the fastest growing demographic group enrolling in college, and COVID-19 has threatened that progress. To better understand this issue, we contacted AccessU faculty member Monica Gomez for our blog post titled Finding the Missing Hispanic Students. Monica is a counselor for the Office of Recruitment and Admissions at Northern Virginia Community College. She also teaches a college success skills course to first-year students and is a certified career coach in the state of Virginia. Ms. Gomez has 18 years of experience in higher ed, in particular working with first-generation and underrepresented student populations. So, Monica, thank you again for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks so much for having me, Rachel.
So just to jump in and get started, I will point out for our listeners that the article uses data from the National Student Clearinghouse Research Center indicating that Hispanic or Latino enrollment fell 7% from 2019 to 2021. So my question for you, Monica, is how did the pandemic affect enrollment so dramatically, in your opinion?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I think it was just a kind of a combination of the impact that the COVID pandemic had on everyone, with families that are already struggling. There was a lot of job loss in the Latino community. A lot of folks were getting sick and unable to, maintain their jobs. Therefore, a lot of students in our colleges had to either stop going to school or stop enrolling, drop to part-time because they had to either take on additional hours at work or, stay home to take care of younger siblings or whatever the case might be. So all of that, I think, was compounded because of what was happening, with the pandemic.
And how integral can family responsibilities be, but especially in the Hispanic culture?
Oh, yes, it's paramount, really. There's usually multiple generations living together, and so the family responsibility is pretty big, especially for the younger, younger generations to take care of, grandparents or, anyone else in the family that may not be able to take care of themselves, younger siblings, things like that. So, a lot of responsibility usually falls on the teens and young adults within the household.
And we did see many states applying federal COVID relief funding into education. Has this helped getting people to re-enroll after the devastation of COVID?
I think it has helped. I know at our institution, we've been lucky and have been able to provide some of this funding, to our students. And I do see that it's helped our students. Unfortunately, is it helping quickly enough? Is it helping, bounce those numbers back in the same, way as it was pre-COVID? We haven't seen that quite yet, but I think it's made a little bit of an impact, but I don't think it's moved the needle enough.
When it comes to moving that needle, economically, what does the domino effect from this enrollment crisis look like in the long term?
Yeah, I think it's pretty serious, and I do know that colleges, across the country, are looking at what can be done because it is really a big issue if we can't get these students, not just Hispanic students, of course, but the students that have had to drop out, or take some time off to re-enroll. It's going to have these lasting effects on our economy, on these generation of students, in terms of what their future is going to look like if they're not able to, get credentialed, with some, whether it's an associate's degree or beyond that, because it can impact what their future, can look like in terms of potential earnings and, and things like that.
And in your experience, especially working with first generation college students, what are some of their biggest hesitations when it comes to going to school and pursuing their degree?
I think their biggest concerns are usually getting into debt, large amounts of debt. And so they hesitate, taking out loans, in terms of, having to be able to juggle, going to school, working, the family responsibilities, but having that financial debt is a huge concern, for a lot of students. So a lot of times I think they balk at, having to take on a great amount of debt, which, is not a bad thing, because we know that that's also another issue, in terms of large student debt that's a lot of students are facing when they finish college. But, we have to find a balance in terms of, providing some financial resources and support for students, especially coming out of COVID, and being able to help support them so that they can get back to school.
And we do know that when it comes to specifically COVID relief funding, that money is going to run out, and some of it has already run out in certain arenas. And that said, right now, Hispanic students may be lost in the world of higher ed, but that does not mean they can't be found. So in your opinion, what can colleges and universities do about this to just better understand their audience and connect with their life experience of underrepresented students?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that all colleges really need to focus on that at this point, and really work with their counseling staff, their advisors, to connect with students. As I think, especially with the Hispanic population, making a personal connection is really paramount to their success. And once they have that connection with somebody, it makes a big difference. And I've seen it in my work, these past 15 years that I worked at Nova, with students who, once they make that connection with you, it can make a huge difference in terms of, motivation and feeling that accountability to someone, outside of their family unit. And so that, I think, can make a big difference. So I think it's important for colleges in general just to, find ways to be able to provide that support to students, and also using the peers, so kind of coming up with some kind of like peer mentoring programs and things like that, where they can hold each other accountable, but also support each other. So I think that can go a long way as well, especially in a time like this, coming out of this pandemic, which is unprecedented, because a lot of families have gone through difficult times. And so I think, both having professional support as well as their own peers, can really make a difference.
When it comes to professional support or student mentors, something that we talked about with this blog was reaching out at the high school level, but also making sure that people have a bilingual staff, because we know that for big topics like this and really wanting to make that connection, Google Translate's not going to cut it.
Right. Exactly. Yes. So I think making sure that investing in training and also in hiring bilingual staff is very important. It's important to have that cultural connection. I can tell you, being a bilingual myself, when I connect with the family and even the students themselves, but the parents especially, their eyes light up when they see, that the staff member speaks Spanish, can understand them, can explain to them the process, in their native language. Even if they do speak a little bit of English, it's always so much easier to kind of put everything into context in their native language. So it really goes a long way, I think, if the institutions, can really make that a priority in terms of finding dedicated staff who are bilingual and bicultural.
Going off of that, tell us about how you curated the Dreamers page on the Nova website and this talented group of scholars that you're working with.
Oh, yes. So myself and a colleague, Ramel Aguilar, who is also an advisor at Nova, we've seen a need for quite some time, with Nova. Nova is the largest institution here in this part of Virginia, and really on the whole state. And so we know that there's a lot of students who are undocumented, we call them dreamers, and they needed some good resources, a place to really go to for information, that was dedicated for them. And so that was really the impetus behind our mission to create kind of a central location on our website to provide them with information that's best, going to serve their needs. Information such as, how do I apply for financial aid? Now that that's, a possibility for the state financial aid in Virginia. How do I qualify for in-state tuition? Am I able to do that? What are the criteria? All that information that was kind of elusive and kind of, not really clear to students, and was kind of coming word of mouth instead of having it, printed in a central place. So we wanted to make sure that was available to students and staff and families. So that was really kind of what motivated us to create this. So, and we're very proud of that project and have, continued to make sure that students and families, staff and faculty anywhere know about it so that they can point students to that information. It does provide them with resources for scholarships as well that students can look into and apply to. So there's a lot of good information as well as outside external resources in the community that they can look at if they need immigration help. We're not necessarily promoting any of these, but just providing it as information so that they can look into that. So that's very important. I also do work with a group of scholars called the Dream.us. That's a national scholarship organization that provides scholarship support specifically to undocumented and DACA TPS students. And they're a wonderful organization. We've partnered with them for many years, and they send us usually about 10 to 12 scholars every school year. And then they work with me as their main advisor so that they can stay on track, develop an academic plan, and, help navigate the ups and downs of what can be college life.
And there is that saying, knowledge is power. Do you think that also applies when first generation students are looking at what they need to know for college and maybe they don't know where to start and they find a program like this?
Oh, yes, definitely. I think the more information they can get, it's always going to benefit them in terms of helping them develop a plan, helping them to figure out what their next steps can be. It can be an overwhelming time for students graduating high school and trying to figure out what comes next in terms of their education. And so having these opportunities can really make a big difference.
And this sounds like something that can definitely also apply to social media and social listening. I know that we've talked with some other AccessU faculty members about going on Instagram and TikTok. Look at what these target demographics are saying. Read the comments, look for trends on social to understand your audience. Do you think that's a part of it too, in terms of outreach and just getting the information out there?
Oh, most definitely. I think that it's important to look at what the youth are doing and using, so in terms of social media, it's something, for better or worse, it's something that they are using a lot. And so we need to use it to our advantage and, and glean information from that, in terms of comments and things that they might make, but also helping to develop content that, can address their concerns and things that might be able to help them on their journey.
We're seeing so often now that marketers and academic advisors, there's a lot of crossover, because not only are you trying to get the information out there, but you're also connecting with the student and understanding their personal situation when it comes to their educational journey and getting their degree. But you've worked, so much with these programs. What's the most critical advice that you feel you've been able to give to students?
It's a great question. I think for me, it's really the first and foremost is about dreaming big, right? So having that vision, because a lot of times, especially students that are from underserved populations, are afraid to dream and not really, daring to go out and take a step towards that direction of their dreams. So I really encourage them to dream big, first of all. And then to put in the hard work, and access their resources. It should never be a journey that they try to do alone. And I always try to make sure that that's clear when I'm working with students, and even with their families, with Hispanic families in particular. You're not just working with the student, you're really working with the entire family unit. And so that's really important to remember that, because I think if you make a connection with the family, it's going to benefit the student, overall, and help them on their journey. And so it's going to make a big difference for everybody.
Are there any other resources that you would like to shout out there for people who may be listening, and also just plug the Dreamers page as well, if you'd like to?
Yes. So I would love to plug the Nova Dreamers page. That is nvcc.edu/Dreamers. Has a great depot of information, both for our campus as well as for the community, resources that students can tap into. And I'd also like to kind of plug students to use the resources within their own high schools, because the schools really do have great resources to help students both look for scholarships as well as other resources that can help them get through high school and prepare for higher education.
Thanks again, Monica. Always a pleasure. For anyone listening who would like to read our blog, Finding the Missing Hispanic Students, you can learn all about that and more at AccessU.com.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Access Success Podcast, produced by AccessU, a division of Access Advertising and Public Relations. Find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram to keep up with what the world of education needs to hear, at AccessU Agency, and connect with us at AccessU.com. Let's do something big.